Welcome to Need to Know Economics, where we cover anything economics, technology, history, and politics. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks it's crazy it's 2022 already, nearly 2 years after the global health crisis. And with every year comes new expectations. Some of us have a personal expectations of getting fit, hitting the gym in the new year, or maybe starting a new diet. And some of us have waited for 2022 to be the year the US dollar collapses into hyperinflation, so our 1 ounce of gold could finally hit $5,000. Obviously, I'm being a little sarcastic here, but here at Need to Know Economics, we like to have real expectations. Not only on what to expect with economics, but of a personal aspect of how we should think and how we should challenge the status quo and reactionaries and be a contrarian's contrarian. So with that, let's dive into the top 5 biggest risks going into 2022, and make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this type of content. There are plenty of economic risks that could potentially happen in 2022. For example, let's flash back 2 years ago. I was just moving back to my hometown, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with my newborn child, just excited for a new decade and a new year. To have the year start out with the late great Kobe Bryant passing away early in that January, and then 2 months later having a global health crisis force lockdowns across the entire city and entire nation. And I'm pretty sure many of you felt the same exact way about 2020. So let's just say anything could happen. But let's start with the most reasonable expectations. Number 5, US midterms. No matter what your politics are, 2022 is going to be an extremely telling year on what the public feels about the Biden administration and what the future of this country entails. And no, not only from the left and right general elections, but also within the primaries and within the parties themselves. Will the millennial progressive Democrats finally take the throne of the moderate establishment Democrats, or will the big lie Trump loyalists be replaced with moderate Republicans like Glenn Youngkin? These elections will tell us whether we move more towards stimulus with Biden's Build Back Better agenda, or we get gridlock in Washington with austerity measures. Time will only tell where November 2022 will take us. Number 4, geopolitical tensions. With consumer price inflation skyrocketing due to the supply chain disruptions, and the dollar becoming stronger and stronger by the day, major tensions have been placed on many emerging market economies like China, Turkey, and Russia. These countries' foreign dollar debts have strengthened in the midst of the need of a currency devaluation due to the pandemic. This has placed many of these countries in a strange predicament of either austerity and higher interest rates or rising inflation. Countries like China have taken austerity measures, which they recently reversed, while countries like Turkey have skyrocketing inflation. Nations like Russia have hoarded gold and have moved more towards geopolitical tensions. And these tensions don't always have to be direct conflicts with the United States. Both World War I and World War II were both started by emerging market geopolitical invasions with global factions and interests joining forces. And at the end of the day, let's all hope this does not happen, but this is one risk we need to be aware of. Number 3, the Big C. I'm not going to name this threat due to fear of being demonetized, but as someone who just came off of having the 3rd variant of this sickness, who really knows what could happen in 2022? I wouldn't be shocked if it were finally to all end in 2022, but I also wouldn't be shocked if we have a new variant that causes a zombie apocalypse at this point. And obviously I'm joking to some extent, but if you were to ask me in 2022 if I would have thought this crisis would still be happening 2 years later, I'd truly call BS. But we've seen that we cannot collectively fight off this crisis. Number 2, continued supply chain disruptions. Our supply chain is globally broken. From labor to logistics, shipping, manufacturing, the entire global supply chain is causing massive distortions in goods supply. And this massive distortion has resulted in a commodity supercycle, and one that we haven't really seen since 2008. One of the issues with this commodity supercycle and the supply chain disruptions is consumer price increases. And because many pundits are comparing the consumer price inflation we're seeing to the great inflation of the 1970s, we really want to take a look at what types of inflation there are. In the 1970s, the US had true inflation, where consumer and working populations were increasing at such a fast rate that there wasn't enough supply to meet demand. It became more logical to dump cash and investments into producing more goods for this growing population. And this dynamic in the 1970s was true monetary inflation, where the currency loses value and consumer prices increase was a secular trend. The inflation we're seeing today is not this 1970s true monetary inflation. Yes, there is consumer price inflation, and gas prices are going up, but the dollar is still strong, and bond yields are still at a record low. And most importantly, working and consumer populations are still declining. And this distorted inflation without secular trends leads to this step-by-step process. Step 1. Higher consumer prices within the United States. Step 2. Americans complain about higher gas prices and higher consumer prices. Step 3. Austerity measures are placed within the United States, which strengthens the dollar. Step 4. Austerity measures increase dollar demand, squeezing international dollar funding in the Eurodollar system. Step 5. International dollar stress leads to global deflation. Step 6. Global deflation leaks into the United States. Step 7. Global deflationary pressures along with the leaking deflation rapidly rejects higher consumer prices within the United States and leads to price decreases. Step 8. The US goes into deflation. And last, Step 9. Fed go burr. And we've all seen this musical before, whether it's 2008 or another period of time following the 2008 housing crisis. So here at Need to Know Economics, we definitely expect and predict this same type of event to possibly happen with some of these supply chain disruptions. And last, the biggest risk of them all, rapid deflation. As we just covered, if the supply chain worsens, global deflationary pressures are strengthened. But no matter what, when capitalism and governments solve this supply chain crisis, deflation will be roaring back either way. And this is right in the middle of distorted public views on inflation and higher inflation expectations and fears. The world and America just do not have the secular trends of growing populations and a growing economy to beat out inflation like we did in the 1970s. And as we covered in previous videos, deflation could lead to deflationary spirals. But today, most economists and central bankers understand we cannot move more towards deflation. So we move more towards quantitative easing and their central banking wizardry. And honestly, like I said, we've all seen this musical before. This will most likely result in short-term deflationary spikes, an international rush for dollars and treasuries, a crash in stocks, resulting in fiscal stimulus and quantitative easing following, with stocks rebounding and reflation occurring. Jerome Powell will be on the cover of Time magazine. This will leave a Catalan effect, leaving the rich to get only richer with massive wealth inequality and more adoption into cryptocurrencies by millennials who are looking to leave the system. As I said, we've seen this playbook before. We've seen it all across the world, especially in the United States. And as we just went over, we shouldn't freak out about this risk because we've seen it play out time after time, but it is impacted by the fifth risk of the US midterms. With potential gridlock in Washington, some of the key fiscal pieces of this solution of reflation could disrupt the entire fiscal piece of this solution, which could potentially lead to this deflationary spiral. And as many of you may have seen, there are many influencers and ideologues who live in their ivory towers working for their hedge fund managers in their safe spaces who really think deflationary spirals are the solution to all of our problems. But ultimately, time will only tell what occurs, politically and economically. And all in all, most of these risks will not impact you or your peers as much as your personal risks may be.
We also created a Patreon to support us in making this type of content. Just search needtoknoweconomics.com/Patreon to join. Money can be frustrating, and that's why we partner with companies that make money easy, like Acorns. As a child, I used to love going to the coinage machines at the grocery stores just to see how much money I saved from my paper route and all my pocket change. But as I got older and stopped using cash, I stopped going. And on top of that, all the change I saved up was depreciating in value every day. And that's where Acorns makes this process easy and efficient in today's digital world. Acorn rounds up every transaction on your debit card to the nearest dollar and invests it into indexes that appreciate over time into savings, retirements, or even your child's investment account. They'll even ship you a debit card to earn cash back from hundreds of different online stores. Just go to needtoknoweconomics.com/acorns to create an account and get a $5 bonus investment.